An incident which is perhaps one of the most widely publicized and well-known close encounter cases involved Betty Hill and her late husband Barney. The Hill case has become a classic example of alleged extraterrestrial contact with human beings because it contains elements which are still the subject of heated debate among UFO investigators all over the world. On the 19th of September, 1961, as Betty and Barney Hill were driving in the White Mountains of New Hampshire, they saw a distant point of light which seemed to move erratically. As it moved closer, the light became more intense, Betty Hill remembers.
When we reached what is called the Indian Head area, this craft left the top of the mountain, came out of the highway, and stopped in midair. Barney took the binoculars and started out of the car in an attempt to identify the craft. And as he did this, he saw a group of figures standing in the windows looking down at him. One was saying to him, "Don't be afraid. Keep looking, stay there. Don't be afraid. No harm's going to come to you, but stay there." And the craft started to descend. And Barney ran back to the car, saying we had to get out of there. They were going to capture us. And we took off speeding down the highway. There was a series of beeping sounds.
That was all the Hills could remember about the incident when they finally arrived home, but they both had an uneasy feeling that there was something more. Months passed, but life was not the same for the Hills. Barney suffered recurring headaches. They were tense, upset, couldn't sleep. Finally, they took their troubles to a Boston psychiatrist, Benjamin Simon, who used hypnotic regression to discover the root cause of their distress.
We relived where the ones on the craft were now on the ground, blocking so we couldn't drive. Barney put on the brakes, the car motor died. They separated, came up on each side, took us out, took us in a path through the woods, took us on board, gave us physical examinations. We were being kidnapped.
Betty Hill remembers being able to offer a detailed description of her alien abductors.
They were all shot. The leader, I would say, was my height or just a little taller than I am, and I'm 5 foot. They all had dark uniforms. I shouldn't say uniform. All had a one-piece dark clothing on. And some were wearing jackets, and some were wearing caps, others were not. They were bald, no hair, no eyebrows, no eyelashes, and no earlobes, no ear, we could say. Very large eyes, very small flat nose, thin slit for a mouth.
Dr. Simon was astounded by Betty's hypnotic recall of the alleged abduction, mainly because Barney told him essentially the same incredible story in a separate hypnotic interview. Simon felt the possibility of a hoax was remote. The Hills had obviously undergone a traumatic experience, but was it real or an illusion? Betty Hill describes her experience aboard the craft.
I was shown a star map. When he showed me the map, he said, "Do you know where you are on the map?" And I said, "No, I don't." So I assumed he meant our sun and planets. He also said the heavy lines on the map were places they went all the time. The lighter lines were places they went occasionally or frequently. The broken lines were expeditions. And of course, our own sun system was a place where they go frequently or occasionally.
Through a post-hypnotic suggestion, Betty reproduced the star map. Years later, an Ohio schoolteacher, Marjorie Fish, saw the map and began a tedious attempt to verify its accuracy.
Since the map was apparently drawn from the vantage point of the UFOnauts and not from Earth, it had to be checked out by way of a model rather than using just our sky maps. And so I started to get information on how to build and started building models of the nearby star systems. I built about 22 models in all. When Betty claims to have seen the map, it was 1961. When she drew the map, it was 1964. The original data I worked with were catalogs from 1963 and 1964, and I was not able to find the whole pattern. I did get a large part of the pattern, but I couldn't fit in the last 3 that had lines to or any of the background stars. And when the 1969 Gliese catalog came out, then the last 3 stars fell into place, plus the background stars. And Betty could not possibly have drawn that map from anything that she had seen or could have used at the time that she drew the map as a hoax. Also, she doesn't have the astronomy knowledge to do so. And again, it could not have been a hoax by anyone else on Earth at that time.
According to Betty Hill's map, the lines representing what she called trade routes converged on a pair of stars known as Zeta 1 and Zeta 2 Reticuli. They are barely visible to the naked eye, and those living in the northern hemisphere can't see them at all. Their estimated distance from Earth is just over 37 light years. Stanton Friedman, physicist and noted UFO lecturer, says that according to Einstein's theory of relativity, 37 light years would be much shorter for those traveling aboard a craft than for those left behind.
What Einstein really said is not only that things can't go faster than the speed of light, and he put it in a much more technical fashion than that, but that as you get closer and closer to the speed of light, time slows down for the things moving that fast. So that, for example, at 99.9% of the speed of light, you could go a 37 light-year distance, forgetting the acceleration time for a moment, in 20 months pilot time. Now, if you really crank up the engine, put her in 6th gear or something, and go 99.99% of the speed of light, it would only take 6 months pilot time for a one-way trip of a distance of 37 light years. It's mind-boggling, sure, but it's real.
Betty Hill's star map is probably the most convincing evidence of alien visitors to Earth thus far. Dr. Hynek summarizes the Hill case.
Now, what many commentators seem to have missed in this star map situation, and which makes the case truly unique, is that the lines connecting certain stars that were drawn by Betty Hill, who by her own admission knew little of astronomy, just happened to connect only those stars that, like the Sun, are capable of supporting life on a nearby planet. The odds against this happening purely by chance are staggering, especially when one considers that of the 1,000 stars in the solar neighborhood, only 48 fall into this category.
Finally, the Air Force has confirmed that a UFO was tracked on radar in the vicinity of New Hampshire's White Mountains on the night of the Hills abduction.
Also, Philip was transported by some means to Azotus when he went down and preached to the eunuch. And the eunuch was in an earthbound chariot, so Philip may have went away in a heavenly bound chariot. The same kinds of words were used in verse 39, and he saw him no more, were used also in 2 Kings 2, 11 and 12, where a chariot of fire appeared and carried away Elijah in a celestial craft of transportation. Amen. Read it all for yourself. It's in the Bible.